What is up, guys? My name is Matt from Magic the Greatening, and today I got a somewhat budget deck tech for you. It's going to be Grixis raiding Pirates Aggro. This is kind of like Pirates 2.0. It is. So before we get into it, go ahead, hit that like button. It helps out a lot. Subscribe if you are new. And click the eye icon, top right corner. We got 5 brand new choices for you guys to vote on. I'm super excited to show those 5 decks off. So yeah, vote for one of those. Let's get into it. We're going to start with the creatures, as we usually do. We're going to start with our 1-drops. We're going to be playing 4 copies of Dead-Eye Tracker, 4 copies of Rigging Runner, and 4 copies of Siren Storm Tamer. Okay, so everyone knows how good Siren Storm Tamer is, or I hope you guys know by now how good this card is. For 1 mana, you get a 1/1 flyer that you can pay a blue and sacrifice this to counter a target spell or ability that targets you or a creature you control. Good at just protecting our creatures from really annoying spells. Doesn't stop sweepers. Do keep that in mind, but stops targeted removal, which is very, very strong. Dead-Eye Tracker, the more I play with this card, the better it gets for me, because Explorer is a broken, it's not broken, but it's a pretty strong mechanic, and if you can pay 2 mana to do it on a 1-drop, it's relatively strong. Most of the times you're going to have a 2-drop to play, so you probably won't use this ability on turn 2, but later in the game, when you're just trying to either get lands out of your deck and draw cards or see what you're going to do next, Explorer is super strong, and Dead-Eye Tracker is good for that. Otherwise, a 1-mana 1/1 isn't terrible, I guess. And then Rigging Runner, again, another 1-mana 1/1 with first strike. But if you had Raid, which is if you had a creature attack this turn, it enters with a +1/+1 counter. So it can be a 1-mana 2/2 first strike, which is really, really relevant, because most creatures that they're going to be playing earlier are with like 1 or 2 toughness, and first strike is super strong, especially on a 1-drop. So those are 1-drops. Let's move up the curve. Okay, we're going to just talk about the rest of the creatures, which are just 2 and 3 drops here. We're going to be playing 3 copies of Karizev Skyship Raider, 4 copies of Fathom Fleet Captain, 4 copies of Daring Saboteur, and 3 copies of Captain Lannery Storm. Let's talk about the pirates I didn't play in my other pirates deck. That would be everything but Fathom Fleet Captain here. Karizev is a very good card in mono red aggro, and it's very good here. A 1-mana or a 2-mana 1/3 with first strike and menace is actually kind of hard to deal with, especially since it puts out another attacker. You need 3 blockers to successfully block all damage from Karizev, which is, I guess, really important. Otherwise, like things like Fell Flagship will also make this a 2-mana 2/3 with first strike and menace, which is also really strong. And then Daring Saboteur, for 2 mana, you get a 2/1 that you can pay 3 to make this unblockable. But whenever it deals combat damage, you get the loot, which, again, is very, very strong. A 2-mana 2/1 isn't necessarily the best thing ever in the world, but if they're not playing anything on turns 1 and 2, and you're able to get in with like a Dead-Eye Tracker or Siren Storm Tamer, then Daring Saboteur, getting the loot at least once with this card is really good. And then later in the game, the board stall out, you're trying to push in the last few things of damage, you can make this unblockable, and that is that's like relevant. It's not irrelevant. So yeah, and then Captain Lannery Storm isn't as good as on-crop Crasher, but it's up there in terms of power. For 3 mana, you get a 2/2 with haste. That says whenever this attacks, you get a treasure token, and then whenever you sacrifice a token, it gets +1/+1/+ until end of turn. So there's plays where you're on turn 3 where you have a 1-drop in your hand, and you slap down a Captain Lannery Storm, you swing in, you get your treasure token, you crack it before damage, you hit in for 3 with Captain Lannery, and then you play your 1-drop off that mana. So very, very strong there. The card I didn't play in my other Pirates deck, but it looks kind of underwhelming. But if you're able to get 1 or 2 treasure tokens out of this, kind of like Daring Saboteur, if you can loot 1 or 2 times, you get full value out of the card. So yeah, and then Fathom Fleet Captain is the last thing. Is our 2-mana 2/1 with Menace. That whenever this attacks, if you control another non-token pirate, you can pay 2 to create a 2/2 pirate creature token with Menace. That's also really strong. We're playing a whole bunch of 1 and 2 drops. That ability shouldn't be too hard to get off. Again, it's another late mana game sync. If you're flooding out or something, you can have things like Daring Saboteur or use the abilities Unfathomed Fleet Captain to sink your mana into. And also, it's got Menace, and people underestimate Menace. It's a very, very strong ability, especially on 2 drops. That's why we're playing a whole bunch of things with Menace, like Carry Zev and Fathom Fleet Captain. Also, the pirate token it comes out with also has Menace. It's just a super strong 2 drop, and there's no reason not to be playing 4 of in this deck. Let's move to the non-creature spells, and we're going to start with the removal first. We're going to be playing 4 copies of Lightning Strike and 3 copies of Shock. I'm trying to keep this deck as budget as possible, so that's why we're playing Lightning Strike and not Abrade. But the good thing about Lightning Strike is it also can hit players, and since we're trying to be an aggressive deck, we want the option to hit players, which is why we're also playing Shock instead of Magma Spray. So Lightning Strike. For 2 mana, it's a lightning bolt for an extra mana, which isn't necessarily terrible. It's a very, very good card. So yeah, and then Shock is just Shock. So we want the flexibility to be able to hit creatures and players, and that's why we're playing Lightning Strike, and Shock. We're not even playing Abrade in the sideboard. We're trying to be aggressive, not controlling, and I feel like Abrade's more in mid-range and control decks, so there's that. Let's move on. All right, let's talk about the last 3 non-creature spells. We're going to be playing 2 copies of Fell Flagship, 3 copies of Chart a Course, and 2 copies of Sword Point Diplomacy. Okay, so Fell Flagship, let's just run over this quickly. I briefly mentioned it earlier. For 3 mana, you get a 3/3 artifact vehicle that says Pirates you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. Whenever Fell Flagship deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card. We're mostly going to be using this for its Anthem effect on our pirates. If you can drop like turn 1 and turn 2, if you can drop 3 1-drop pirates, and then turn 3 you drop this, you're probably going to win the game. But yeah, so being able to loot with this, I guess, is okay. It's not a really, really strong vehicle. Honestly, you could probably just replace this with like 2 Heart of Kirans, and it would that would just do infinitely better than Fell Flagship. But since we're trying to stay budget and I wanted to have some sort of pirate anthem effect that's cheap, Fell Flagship was perfect for that. And then Chart a Course for 2 mana, sorcery speed. It says draw 2 cards, then discard a card unless you attack with a creature this turn. This is part of the raid. I know we only have a few creatures that quote-unquote have raid. Actually, there's only one, and it's Rigging Runner. But this also has raid. Fathom Fleet Captain, whenever it attacks, it's kind of like a raid thing. Captain Lannery Storm, whenever it attacks, stuff like that. Daring Saboteur, whenever it deals combat damage or to a player, you loot, stuff like that. So Chart a Course is one of our better raid cards. For 2 mana, most of the times it just draws you 2 cards, which is insanely good. It's a reason to play blue in the deck. So, and then Sword Point Diplomacy is just like Chart a Course, where we're going to be able to cheat in more draws. For 3 mana, at sorcery speed, it says reveal the top 3 cards of your library. For each of those cards, put that card into your hand unless an opponent pays 3 life, then exile the rest. I'm only playing a 2 of this because it's good when your opponent's down to very little life and they have nothing else but to let you draw the 3 cards. Now, early in the game, it's bad because, again, your opponent gets to choose what goes into your hand and stuff like that, and you can always sideboard it out. I only wanted to play 2 of. It's only good when you're really, really ahead and you're trying to push the final points of damage and you're just forcing your opponent to lose life. That's what this card's about. So, the card isn't terrible. It's very bad when you're behind. It's not very good when they're not down to, like, 10 life or less, but if they're down to 10 life or less, this card's really, really good. And sometimes it can just win you the game because it draws you like a lightning strike or something, and they're already down to 3 life. They have to let you draw the lightning strike. So the 2 copies of Sword Point Diplomacy. Okay, it's land time, and now the lands themselves cost over $50, which is well over half the budget of the deck. So if you don't want to have all these expensive dual lands and all that stuff, you could probably just play a whole bunch of island, mountain, swamps, and probably a few Attune with Ethers if you had, or not Attune with Ethers, Aether Hubs if you had them, or stuff like that. But this is the lands I ran for this deck, and if you don't want to pay for everything else, I would just recommend playing all the basic lands and maybe a few Evolving Wilds or something like that. But we're playing 3 Dragon Skull Summit, 2 Drowned Catacomb, 4 Spirebluff Canal, 1 Unclaimed Territory, 2 Island, 4 Mountain, 4 Swamp. Mostly the deck is black and red. We have a few blue cards like Siren Storm Tamer, Daring Saboteur, Charted Course, and we have some blue card. We have a lot of blue cards in the sideboard. So, again, if you don't want to pay $50, especially $38 or $40 for Spirebluff Canal, you can probably just replace the Spirebluff Canal with more basic lands, and you'd cut $40 from the deck. So, let's move to the sideboard. Okay, the sideboard mainly consists of things against deck that run Sweeper. This is the problem with my Pirates deck and my Vampires deck and my first Pirates deck was, decks that ran Settle the Wreckage, Sweltering Suns, Bantu's Last Reckoning, all these 3 and 4 mana sweepers that we don't like. So we're playing 3 Kitesail Freebooter. And the sideboard kind of goes on theme as well with the raid mechanic, because a flyer is actually pretty decent, and being able to get removal out of your opponent's hand is super strong. 4 Lookouts Dispersal as a counter if we want to start going a little bit more mid-range. 4 Magma Spray against other aggro decks. If we want more removal, you could probably take out Fell Flagships and Sword Point Diplomacies and replace them with Magma Sprays. And 4 Spell Pierce. Spell Pierce is probably the best thing against sweepers, because the early sweepers are what kill us the most. So I'm playing Spell Pierce over Negate here because we like that 1 mana stuff. We want to fit as many spells into 1 turn as can and push as much damage early as we can. If we have to leave up mana for Negate, that's just not worth it. The problems we have early is those 3 and 4 mana sweepers when we already have 2, 3, 4 creatures out. So Spell Pierce can help counter those. Lookouts Dispersal can also do that. So I wanted to play a whole bunch of stuff that ruined our opponent's plans, and I feel like the sideboard does that well. We're not playing anything else. I feel like our worst matchup is sweepers. Decks that are going to run a lot of sweepers, which I feel like is going to be a huge thing. So the sideboard is built perfectly for that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to go ahead and vote. Top right corner eye icon. 5 decks up there for you guys. Go ahead and vote. I'm really excited to show you guys those decks. They're really, really cool. But I hope you enjoyed this video too. It's a little bit more aggressive pirate deck than I made. And yeah, I'll see you in a few days.